this episode, we're basing it off of podcast episode with Rogan.
Yeah.
About hotness and beauty. So you have a book of notes on the floor. I'll let you start with this because you seem very passionate about this topic.
Well, I was, but I also, you just watched the video. Yeah, so I kind of want to find out what your initial, gut reaction to it is. Because I feel like that's a thing. What is your...
Okay, so when they were talking about monogamy, I don't know. For me, that word is iffy. Okay, for some reason, that word to me, it doesn't feel like it's authentic. When they were giving the 3 examples of how a male views reproduction, right? Mm-hmm. It was very much, there was no spiritual or emotional aspects that they mentioned in either.
You're absolutely right.
It was very dry, and they were only mentioning the physical aspects of all of it. Uh-huh. And I feel like that goes under the category of hotness throughout the entire thing. So it was almost neglecting beauty in itself, because beauty is the person themselves, their personality, their passion, their...
You're totally on all of my notes here. I love this. Okay.
It's the whole circle. But when they were talking about monogamy, right? Yeah. Monogamy itself isn't the bad word. Monogamy is simply describing that you are for this one person.
Right.
You are only in a relationship with this person. I forgot the other word they used. I think it was
polygamy.
Polygamy, that was it. Yeah. Which I'm assuming is the complete opposite of monogamy.
Well, polygamy is you have multiple partners. You have one, usually,
okay, so.
You think of it as in you have one man that has multiple wives.
And another thing that they talked about, I know I'm going off topic, but they were also talking about how previously, historically, it was completely acceptable for a man to have 3, 4, 5 wives.
Right.
And I think it's interesting how we've decreased from that to only accepting one.
Well, I think, and we'll get into this too, because there's a lot of biblical, thoughts about that as well. But yeah, we'll get into that. But so, you had a problem with the word monogamy because it did have
it lacked the emotional aspect and personality aspect. I feel like they were only really driving that term from the physical aspects of it.
Right. I completely agree, and that's something that I pulled out of it. And I'm just gonna say, I think what was missing was the idea of love. Mm-hmm. Love was never... That
word was never mentioned. Said in that entire video.
So the whole idea of the relationships on any level, it was just about... It was very much about reproduction, which there's multiple things to talk about in that realm. Because if you think about it, first of all, they're not talking about love. They're not talking about somebody caring about or having an interest in taking care of somebody, which I think requires love. If you're going to put forth any energy towards anyone, there's a certain amount of love that's required, right? It doesn't have to necessarily be romantic love, but there's a love there, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that's the one thing, and then what was the other thing? There was something else I was going to mention. I can't remember, but anyway, it'll come to me. Lord, let me remember, please. But anyway, the lack of talking about love was what really struck me as being the important aspect, because again, let me get into the notes that I have, because I think it'll be easier. So, hotness versus beauty, and I think you touched on something else too. Is it still going?
I think we're good.
Okay.
Do you want me to check or?
Well, can you tell off of it?
No.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah, just check. Okay.
My camera.
Seriously.
Okay, back to what you were saying.
Okay, so he's talking about beauty, and he says that he, immediately thinks about, beautiful women that are beautiful but not hot. And one of the things that he says is what's interesting is that a lot of the women in that category are older women that he can say are beautiful. And I think that what is interesting is that if you listen closely, even though it isn't overtly stated, underlying it, really what they're talking about, and he even talks about personality. So he's not only bringing in just the aesthetics of the person, you know, how they look, but he's bringing in their whole person, their personality, right? Whereas hotness it doesn't have any of that. It's simply looks. There's an element to it where you can tell that he cares about those people. In other words, there's a connection made, right? And that connection is deeper than just surface. So I think that there is a portion of that where he's capturing that, but he doesn't realize it when he's talking, because he doesn't say it. He just says, you know,
There's almost a subconscious realization, because I know what you're talking about. When he was describing how majority of beautiful people are elder, right?
Older, yeah.
They have white hair, wrinkles. That's how he described them. But when he got to know them,
is it the battery?
I don't know. Okay, we're back. I'm sorry. Are you gonna stay on?
Wow.
Okay. A bipolar camera. Sweet. Okay, basically, because I know what you're talking about. There was that aspect where he said they're a beautiful person.
Right.
Like that was those were the two words he said. They are a beautiful person.
Mm-hmm.
Capturing that, you know, he's appreciating the person themselves, the personality and the emotional side of things. Like I know what you're talking about. But it was almost short-lived. It was very short-lived.
Well, and I think it's because the whole conversation wasn't about, he was very, you know, he was looking at things from an evolutionary perspective, right? And basically saying that we've grouped beauty and hotness into one entity when it really isn't. It's two completely separate things. So getting into what I derived from that or whatever, for a long time now, I've believed that there's two methods of living in general. There's survival mode, and then there's relationship mode. And those are on two different ends of the spectrum. And what really kind of initiated that thought process was looking into narcissism. You know, how do you... But the thing is that a narcissistic person, or a person who suffers from this, lives a very defensive life, right? And everything is about themselves. But in reality, deep down inside, it's all about survival. When you start to look into what their motivations are, they want power, they want the facade of being an amazing person. They want everyone to love them. They want money. They want, you know, so they want all these things that really would set them up to be safe. Yeah. You know what I mean? In a world where anybody could take advantage of them, they're not team players at all. But then when you look on the other side, and you look at somebody who's empathetic, who values relationship, there's a lot of giving, right? There's much more selflessness, and the idea isn't survival at that point. The idea is I hate the word sacrifice, but I'm going to, let's change the word. Let's say I'm going to give up the feeling of having complete control, of having all these resources that I keep to myself and hoarding this, whatever it is, and I'm going to give it to other people for the sake of having connection with them. So there's this spectrum, right? And if you think about it, everybody falls somewhere on that spectrum, whether they're living completely in survival mode or completely in relationship mode. They fall somewhere in between. Well, this podcast actually kind of inspired me to look at both sides, because when I thought of beauty and hotness, I saw the exact same distance. I saw that spectrum. So if you put hotness...
From relationship and survival.
Yes. Okay. So if you put hotness in the category of survival, which is what they're talking about, evolutionary, the idea that, you know, he was talking about the three methods that men reproduce, right? Mm-hmm. So hotness is the extreme lack of responsibility. I get to spread my seed, if you will, with this, with no strings attached, versus beauty, where beauty requires something from yourself, like we're talking about how he felt a connection with these people, which would require you to give something of yourself, right? Which would be on the other end of, so put hotness with survival and beauty with relationship. Now do it with love and lust.
And we talked about this previously.
We did talk about this previously. So lust is on the side of survival with hotness, and love is on the side of relationship and beauty, right? So you think about this in those terms. I think it's very simple to correlate those things and say, if you have a human being that is, for instance, in complete and total survival mode, they're probably never going to see beauty. They're probably never going to see or seek out love, to love, or to be loved. They're going to stay in hotness. Because if you're just looking for hotness, it's temporary, which is another item that I put on that same spectrum, which is temporary is survival, but longevity in a relationship is with the relationship side. So there's this complete spectrum, and I this is why I need a whiteboard. This is why
There's nothing here. I'm sorry.
I need a whiteboard so I can draw it out. But the reality is that exists, and so now I have proof, kind of biblical proof, that this is kind of the way of the world and why things are so messed up. Because I think in reality, a lot of times people are talking about apples and oranges and using the same terminology to describe both, or to try to describe, or to they think they're speaking the same words, but they're not. There's a completely different meaning behind them. For instance, if I say, somebody's in a relationship with somebody, relationship to one person could be on that survival level where you're full of lust, you're taking, you're seeing that person as just an object in reality, because that's really what it is. And we've talked about on here too before that lust is transferable and love is not. Well, that's another reason why beauty would be on the far end, because once you decide that somebody's beautiful, they just are beautiful. You know what I mean? Like, unless something about them completely changes.
Continue. It'll change its mind. There you go.
I don't even understand how that does.
Neither do I.
That's just crazy.
Continue.
Okay. So anyway, the idea that you're saying the same words, but with a completely different meaning is part of the issue that we have. And we don't have words in the English language that really can differentiate between the two, but I think it's important that we as people understand what we're talking about. So one of the things that I've said multiple times, and I'm pretty sure you agree with this, is that the majority of men don't know how to love. And I think it's because our culture has taught them to survive. But I also think it's a product of the fall. So, rewind years ago, I was talking to God about relationship. And he told me about, I was asking about sexuality because I had so many questions. I had never been, because of the things that I'd gone through, I'd never been confronted with the thoughts that I'd been confronted with at that time.
Okay.
And so I asked God, about sexuality. And one of the things that I really felt it was like this idea that popped into my head. And I know anytime an idea that is completely random pops into my head, I believe if it's a good one, if it's a good one, then it comes from God. But this was so profound to me that I can't take credit for it, so it's got to be God. But anyway, the idea that came into my head was, what I saw in my head was somebody on the ground eating dirt. Okay, and I think I probably mentioned this before. It's something that I feel like I've said for a long time. There's this person eating dirt, and in the kind of the scene that I saw, there's this place, this table that was set up over on the side. And it was this gourmet meal. It had, all of this beautiful food set up. It was a table. But the person was sitting there Do you want to check?
No, I'm just.
Okay. But the person was sitting there on the ground eating dirt, and they didn't even look over at the meal on the table. And kind of what God showed me was that this is the world with sexuality, is that we have been taught, because of our survival mode, because so much of our existence has forced us into this realm of the spectrum, right? Where we take because we have to, we think we have to, look at things in this very physical way instead of seeking out, deeper meanings and things like that. Because of all that, it's like somebody who's eaten dirt all of their life and likes it and forms an attachment to eating this dirt because it tastes good to them now. And what he said was that sexuality is very much like that, where the world is eating this dirt. And God's over here at this table going, I've got this gourmet meal for you. Come and eat this from this person. And I really like this dirt. It tastes good. And I've eaten this my whole life. And so, even though we can relate to the fact that there's no way that you and I would choose to go outside and eat dirt if there was a beautifully, prepared meal on the table for us. Because we know the difference between what tastes amazing and what dirt would taste like, right? For us as human beings in the sexual realm, dirt is what we know. And so basically what God was saying was that there's a better way. And we don't know it because we've been afraid to let go of the dirt. And I think what the dirt is
because that's what we've grown up comfortable with.
Yeah, and so you're talking about, abuses of sexuality. I mean, you think of, I don't know about you, but I feel like polygamy would be a very painful thing to be a part of.
100%.
Because
Good.
how do you make a real connection? How do the women in your life as the man even get to the point where they can trust you? Because
they can. That trust is not a thing. At that point, it is simply just a reproductive system. It is try to survive.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
And that's the deal.
And I find it interesting because they were talking about on the podcast reproduction, right? How, and it was very much based around breeding, right? And reproduction in general.
Right.
How is it that a man can value having an offspring more than he can value having a relationship with a woman? That's where I'm lost. Because how is it that they're saying a man is completely fine with going from woman to woman to woman as long as he knows that his offspring are out there? Like, having a bloodline is apparently more valued.
But you're talking about the difference between survival and relationship. Again, you have to get to the point where you say having relationship is a valuable asset to me, and survival mode is what we've been in. And I'm going to take us back, again, these notes that I have, it takes us back to Adam and Eve, and it takes us back to the time where God told Adam and Eve the consequences of what they did.
Yeah.
So basically, you guys did this. This is now what's going to happen as a consequence of this. And I don't believe that that's a God. I don't even believe that it was a God-given consequence. I don't think that he was cursing them. I think he was literally just informing them, this is what happens because you are no longer under my covering. Okay. And so, we'll go in fact, we can go into it now. So, I don't have the scriptures written down on the paper, but I figured we would look them up. But basically, I'll put on my glasses. I can't see.
Damn, got the book, the phone, and the glasses.
I know, right?
Professional.
I'm so sorry.
We're not getting paid for this.
I'm so sorry. I'm totally, okay. So the first scripture that I kind of want to go to is Genesis 3:16, and he tells her basically, I'm going to kind of paraphrase, but it's, your desire will be for your husband and he'll rule over you. Okay? So what happened in the fall? Everybody lost their purpose, right? Everybody lost because in the moment that they were separated from God, they basically said, God, we're doing this on our own. This is our thing now, right? And so they lost their purpose in God. So Eve loses her purpose. What happens when Eve loses her purpose? She's no longer a blessing to Adam. Now, and kind of the idea is that he will rule over her because she is no longer seen as an asset. So in other words, that relationship has crumbled, right? Keep in mind, this is Old Testament. This is before Jesus redeemed everything, right? So here we are in this place, which is probably why historically you would have polygamy, you'd have all this stuff, because again, these people are not under the grace of God anymore. They are literally surviving. This is survival mode, which is where we learned from human history what sexuality is. So they're eating the clean dirt, or they're not clean dirt, they're eating the dirt. So then the next verse is 3:17, and God tells Adam that cursed is the ground because of you. And he talks about how now he must toil, and he must, basically strain and work hard to provide for himself, right? And in that moment, he loses his purpose of being made in the image of God, because in the garden, he could provide everything, right? He had dominion over the entire earth. So Adam has dominion over the entire earth. He can give Eve and his offspring whatever they need with ease, because the ground obeys what Adam says.
Yeah.
Now, it's not like that anymore. Now, it's Adam has to use his own energy to create whatever he can to provide, right? So now he's lost his purpose, Eve's lost her purpose, and now Eve becomes what we talked about in the first podcast. She becomes a burden. You knew it was coming.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Some point.
Yeah. She becomes a burden. So they can no longer function in the same way as they did in the garden, which is what Jesus came to restore. And we'll get into why we should be working towards the relationship goal, which is God, when Jesus came back, he came back to establish relationship between man and God. So he's already pushing us towards all of those things that we're talking about: relationship, beauty, love, and forever. You know what I mean? Eternity. We're talking about this. We're not talking about any more survival, temporary, lust, all this stuff. But I don't think we've learned that as the human race. We haven't learned that we can let go of all that stuff in Jesus now, because Jesus took away the roadblock, if you will, between man not being able to live in his purpose anymore, and woman not being able to live in her purpose anymore. Okay. So the whole idea of relationship is gone. Okay, at this point in Adam and Eve, and that's what they're learning. And I think so what did I write here? Okay, so women, and women became a tool of survival at that point, because survival for Adam and his offspring, or any offspring that he could potentially have, meant that he had to have Eve, but she was no longer obviously in a good relationship with him, because God just said, your desire will be for your husband, but he'll rule over you. In other words, your desire is going to become your Achilles heel, if you will, because he'll use that against you. I think in what we're seeing is very much men using women, and that's where you get lust, and that's where you get hotness, and that's where you get, you know what I'm saying? Because it's all about this physical attraction and use, and okay, I feel like that's not. So let's hear your
I can reposition myself to where I was even before I got distracted. I think you're onto something with that, because when the fall happened, for one, you were talking about purpose, right? Mm-hmm. And I just want to put out there, it's a little slightly off topic, but purpose, I feel like we've focused on life so much that we've drawn away from relationships to focus on what we think we should be doing throughout life. Mm-hmm. When in reality, in the beginning, God created the earth, Adam and Eve, and had himself for them to have a relationship. But once they broke that, well, there goes the relationship. And that's exactly what you're talking about, is they lost the relationship with God to survive. Mm-hmm. That's exactly.
And I think that's why Eve ate the fruit. I honestly think that the reason why she took a bite out of that fruit is because Satan put enough doubt in her mind that she could trust God, that she felt like she had to take matters into her own hands, which I feel like is something that happens to people all the time. We are constantly, our temptations, if you will, are presented in the moments when we really need or want something, and waiting on God or having to seek God for it seems like it will take too long, or it will be too complicated, rather than taking whatever has been placed in front of us as a temptation, as the counterfeit to what God really has for us. But anyway, I'm sorry. I'm getting off topic.
But we're both getting off topic because you're going on your whole spiel.
I'm so sorry.
That's fine. That was great. But I think as a race, we've drawn away from that relationship aspect. We focused and have busied ourselves with so many other things in life that we're drawing away from that relationship, and not just relationship with another partner, relationship with God. I feel like it's another fall of man again. That's all it is. It's constant, repetitive. It's repeating itself. History repeats itself.
And we have to say that in that moment, the truth is that we do constantly fall, but the grace of God in Jesus is constant. Yeah. You know Jesus, you're basically saying, God, I need you. I'm going to rely on you to be my grace, to be my salvation. And then whatever you experience after that, God's got you. You know what I mean? And that's why we can go through
these. Which was all after the crucifixion.
Right.
Beforehand, it was, you fucked up.
Well, and there were methods. I mean, God had methods. That's what sacrifices were for. It was constantly to reestablish. But of course, all those sacrifices were kind of, foreshadowing what Jesus was going to do permanently. Right.
Back to what you were saying about how Eve became more of a burden at the end, right? Because Adam had only now seen her as a reproductive mechanism.
Right. And that's what I think happened, yes. Mm-hmm.
That's the only way we can perceive it. Mm-hmm. Like, that's your perspective on it. And I completely agree with that. I think that at some point, Adam's looked at himself and said, I need to survive. I need my name to be brought down through generations of generations. And he looked at Eve as more of a tool instead of a partner.
Well, and I think that's how men, if you talk to men that are not interested in relationship, and they're not interested in loving or caring about women, they talk about them in very objective ways. We hear things like, oh, she's got a nice body part, or it's almost like, and it's very similar to somebody looking for a car or something else. And we know a lot about looking at cars, right? Because we like them. And the thing is that when you're looking at a car, which is an object, you look at certain features. You're not looking to see how the car interacts with you, because you can't. It's not alive.
Me and you have a different interaction between cars and people. That's what I think I'm getting at. Is that there's some people view cars and people as the same.
Right.
They're looking for
cars and women.
Certain features. Right. For example, looking at a truck, you're like, oh, does it have 4-wheel drive? No, it doesn't. I don't want that.
Yeah.
You can relate that. You can correspond that to men nowadays looking at women, saying, oh, does she have this? Oh, no, she doesn't have a
And I think that's the hotness. I think that's what you're talking about when you're talking about hotness. Because beauty, again, we've already discovered that beauty encapsulates the whole person, right? And it's
a whole circle.
I want to say something too, which is interesting to me, coming from a female perspective, looking at that. You know, at the beginning of that Joe Rogan podcast, they ask the question. The guy asks the question of Joe. He says, you know, can you think of somebody who's hot but not beautiful? And Joe kind of, you know, pauses for a second and says, yeah, I can. And then, you know, he asks, can you think of somebody who's beautiful but not hot? And immediately, you know, and even when we were talking to, you know, upstairs with people, you know, like we had the same response. It was like immediate, yeah, I can think of somebody who's beautiful but not hot, right? What's interesting to me about that whole thing is that when I try to do that with men, it does not happen. There's no such thing as hot and handsome. They're either handsome and I could see them as a potential mate or nothing. So there's no distinction. Like there's no guy that I could go, oh wow, he's hot, but all I'd want to do is sleep with him. That doesn't exist in my realm. I can think of guys that I've looked at before, right?
Okay, so I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think that is, I'm not sure if I mentioned this before, but I was watching a clip and it was talking about how men look at things in more of a logical perspective while women look at things in more of an emotional perspective. And I think that's what you're getting onto, is that when a woman looks at a guy and she's attracted to him, she immediately creates this emotional connection to him, to where she doesn't see him as, oh, I could just sleep with him for a night. But it's more of a, I would rather get to know him, I would rather spend time. But the thing is that culture has normalized, oh yeah, you can be a whore. And some females might, you know, mask it like, yeah, I'll just go sleep with 5 different people and walk around. But in reality, they have this deep feeling like, yeah, that I'm attracted to this guy. Men, for some reason, look at it more of, I don't even know how to put it, because like, I don't have that perspective. I'll put it out there. I don't look at people as hot.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I hate that word.
Right.
I don't use it whatsoever. Because it feels gross to me, if that makes sense.
It's the dirt.
Yeah, it's the dirt.
It's
exactly.
The dirt. Mm-hmm.
Even though I love rolling around in dirt.
Actually, you know, dirt would probably be hard for you because you'd be like, well, dirt's kind of fun. And then
I'll have a little dirt on my jeans and I don't mind.
Yeah.
It is pumpkin spice.
But you wouldn't eat the dirt. Oh, okay, pumpkin spice for you.
It is pumpkin spice.
Okay, so pumpkin spice, yeah, that's true. You eat pumpkin spice.
Fucking passion. Okay, but I think that's why you can't view it. Because when you look at a guy, I can guarantee you see the potential, okay? Mm-hmm. It is not a logical thinking, it's an emotional thinking.
Right.
And I think that's why. Because I can completely understand when he was saying that men think in more of a logical, while women think in more of an emotional. In general, both parties need to think in both ways.
Yes.
You need mind, spirit, and soul.
Right.
And
I think you hit on something. I think men, in general, turn off their emotional side. It's almost like it doesn't exist. And maybe that is also indicative of their spiritual side as well. So they're just functioning in...
They're turning off their spiritual and mental side. They're turning off their spiritual side because spiritual is what carries the emotions.
Yes.
While mental and physical carry the feeling and the thoughts.
And can I put something out there right now? Okay, so I think people interpret emotions... We're taught that emotions are bad. Like, as if emotions are the obstacles in life that we have to overcome in order to be successful, right? And that's what we're told over and over again, that emotions somehow create some kind of roadblock.
To an extent, I think emotions... Okay, so like for me, when I go on my runs, okay, emotions become nothing, right? It like shuts off, right? It's a consistent like you're gonna get this
leg.
done.
Okay, but there's a difference between breaking your leg and being in pain and you going, I don't care, I'm gonna run, I'm gonna make it to the thing, whatever, right? Okay, because you do that, but I'm gonna say that it's your emotion that keeps you going, because somewhere inside of you, everything is, your emotions and your values are very closely connected. Okay, and so determination is a feeling. There's a feeling associated with it. It probably gives you somewhat of a rush to.
It's almost an adrenaline rush.
Right, but you have to be inspired by your emotions to feel that. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, so your emotions are there driving you, going, I want to be this if I do this. Yes, exactly.
It's an excitement because like when I'm determined, I have this adrenaline rush, but the only thing I think is getting that accomplishment, right? That's the only thing I'm looking forward to is getting the accomplishment. No matter if I'm starting business or finishing my longest distance travel or anything like that, it's always the accomplishment that gives me the.
And why? What does the accomplishment? What does the accomplishment do for you when you walk away? What is that feeling? What is that? Because it's a feeling. It's there's a positive emotion that is
enjoyment.
An enjoyment probably in knowing that you have pushed yourself past the limits
that I put on myself.
You've challenged yourself and you've overcome it, so now you can move on to the next challenge.
But another thing is not just the destination, it's the progression.
Right.
For some reason, like for me, like just starting a project, the progression, seeing progression is another adrenaline rush, right? I'm motivated when I see progression.
Right.
So to say that the entire excitement comes strictly from the accomplishment would be false. It's the whole thing. It's the journey and the destination.
Okay, so here's what I'm gonna put out there. Okay, look at it from this perspective and see if it matches what you think you experience.
Okay.
I see emotions like the indicators on a dashboard of a car. Okay, and I don't know why, but I use a lot of car analogies.
That's fine. I'll understand it better.
Okay, but like, okay, so emotions are very much like
the gauges.
Those gauges and those indicator lights, because you're driving along, right, and something pops up, like the lack of brake fluid in the Cobalt, right? It's flashing, right? And the thing is that, you know, what's funny is I talked to you about it, and I called Aiden about it, and I was like, hey, you know, is this okay? You know, what's going on? And both of you were like, yeah, it's probably fine. And then what happens when we checked?
We popped that cap open and that reservoir was empty.
Right, and the whole car basically runs off of brake fluid. Like I can't shift.
Just the clutch.
Yeah, I could have. Okay, so here I am driving this car, and there's this lack of brake fluid, and it's a serious thing. But here I am, like, in some ways ignoring that flashing light on my dashboard. That's what human beings. That's what human beings do with their emotions all the time. There's flashing emotions inside of us, and we go, is that even necessary? Or we don't take the time to actually investigate why it's flashing. And then we only find out years later that maybe that flashing indicator back in the day was actually something important that we neglected to look at. And for you, like, so with your running and overcoming challenges and the things, it's like seeing a full tank of gas, or it's a positive indication. You know what I mean? Like, you know, your windshield wiper fluid, you know, thing looks full, or it's all of those things saying, yes, everything's okay. That's the good indicators. And the bad indicators are saying there's something wrong, you need to check this. But both are absolutely necessary for understanding what's functioning inside of you. And I think that men have been taught to ignore all of the negatives and ignore all of the positives and just
drive,
just be. And I think that's survival mode. You know, you when you get a new car and you expect that all the gauges are going to work properly, right? It's, to me, you know, if we're going to put this in relationship to like the survival mode or the relationship mode, when you feel like everything's okay, you can enjoy the scenery as you're driving. You can enjoy the music as you're listening. You can play with the car like we like to do, rev the engine a little and enjoy all of that, right? But if there's something wrong with your car, if you have stuff flashing all over your dashboard, you can't enjoy any of that. And so basically it keeps you locked. When you ignore your emotions, it keeps you locked in survival mode. You can't get out because you don't know what's wrong and you're not willing to figure it out. Because you're afraid, right? Why don't you check certain things when indicator lights come on in your car? Well, check engine light. You said that's like the worst light to come on, right? Check engine light. Why don't you want to look at it? Because you're afraid that when you figure out why the check engine light's on, it's going to be something expensive or disastrous, right? So you avoid it. You let it sit there for 3 months, and it may be destroying your car, but in that moment, it's better than trying to figure out what in the world is wrong because you're afraid of what you're going to find.
And I think relating the worry, the fear of, what could be the problem, and just neglecting it. I think the fear is, how long is it going to take? It's more of a time thing, right? So relating time and money as the same same resource to fix either problem.
Right.
Because for the car, if you have a check engine light, you got to replace your cylinders or whatnot. That's an expensive job.
Right.
Same thing with human emotions. If you have this indicator that this is wrong, and you look at it and that's the problem. Well, I don't want to deal with it. That's too much work.
Right.
I think that's the same thing.
It very much is. And the thing is that again, if we look at the spectrum, right, and we take this back to human interactions and human existence, basically, living, you can't enjoy relationship if you're still dealing with survival. You have to get to the point where you have decided that you're no longer in survival mode, but you are willing to go into the place of relationship. Because relationship, again, if you're driving in a car and you're looking at the scenery and stuff, you're not focused on the car, on all the bad stuff that could be going wrong. You're not scared anymore. You're not fearful anymore. Because your indicator, your dashboards, everything top notch, you're okay because you've dealt with all the problems, right? So your car's in good condition, you're driving along, you can enjoy all of the beauty that surrounds you. And that's like relationship. When you've dealt with all the crap that's in you, that's sending off all these terrible feelings and all this stuff, you can then move on and have a relationship and have something to give. Now, last time we talked about men's purpose, that they're made in the image of God. They were supposed to have dominion over the earth, right? They were supposed to be able to provide for whoever the heck they needed to provide for. They had all the resources. They were supposed to be in charge of the animals and take care of the animals and be friends with the animals, right? There was this whole thing. Well, the image of God is also love, and it's giving. And that's what Adam would have been capable of doing. But when the fall happened, all of his resources were taken away because he was no longer covered under God. He was no longer under the grace of God. He had to do it all himself. And so it would always be a struggle, right? Jesus gave that back to him. Jesus gave him the keys to the earth again. And Jesus would have dominion once again. But the thing is people don't realize that. They don't realize that they're not condemned anymore. So they don't have to, when the dashboard light comes on for condemnation, I'm such a horrible, awful person, beep, 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 beep. A lot of people ignore that. They do all sorts of things to try to distract themselves from that beeping, right? But the truth is that if you were to turn around and look at it and go, am I this terrible, awful, condemned person? When you know Jesus, you go, nope, I'm not. I'm the righteousness of God in Christ. That's truth. And then you can walk away from that going, I know who I am. I'm good with God. I contain value. I was made in the image of God. I was meant to be a king on earth. And when you know that, then you know you have something to share. And then relationship becomes easier. Then you can see beauty. Then you probably will be attracted to beauty and not survival, because survival will become the dirt. Survival, so lust, when you go to someone, because the truth is that when you're always taking from people, in any way, I don't think there's a man out there that doesn't know that when he acts in a lustful way, when he's taken and he has nothing to give, that he's not doing it to the detriment of someone else. And I can't imagine that you walk around feeling pretty good if that's the kind of life you're living. Men or women. I know that there's women out there doing that too. I think I think the problem is that our culture has basically, like, there's a line in that video where he says, because men are men, right? And he's talking about...
In the podcast episode.
Yeah, in the podcast. He said, because men are men. So basically, and what I have a problem, and this is something that's perpetuated everywhere and repeated everywhere, is this idea that men are just lustful, kind of primitive beings that have no real desire for a relationship. I don't think that's true. I think the burdens that men carry are all the lights on the dashboard that they refuse to deal with. And unfortunately, it puts them in a position where their only outlets of survival are going to view the hotness as their outlet, view the lust as their outlet. And that's probably why it's so attractive to them. It's easy, it's temporary, there's no strings attached. They don't have to give anything to receive it. And I think that's why even people who are in married relationships probably can even be attracted to the hotness, because if you have stuff going on in underlying, again, like that guy said, all the burdens, how are you going to deal with all those burdens? You're going to deal with them by trying to find the fastest, quickest, easiest way to feel powerful, strong, to feel something, maybe even positive. I mean, what is sexuality? And that's something that I want to talk about too. Are you up for it? Okay, so what's interesting to me is that sexuality has been made kind of its own entity, but really sexuality is just a form of affection. And what's interesting is that in the relationship, if you look at sexuality within the form of relationship, it follows a certain pattern, it follows a certain progression, right? Like if you meet somebody, let's say you meet a nice girl, right? You may start off and you go out on a date and you smile at each other. That's a form of affection, right? Showing that you're pleased with one another. And then maybe the next date you hold hands, right? And then the next date maybe you give each other a hug goodbye. And then the next date maybe you have a makeout session in the back of your car. I don't know.
Good date. Yeah, quick. All right.
But anyway, what I'm saying is that there's a progression, right? And then I'm going to put it out there. You get married, and then you have sex. But again, we understand that all of that follows a progression, right? You're consistently getting up there. But the one weird thing about sex is that sex, like, almost has a way of, people look at it as it's own thing. Like, you don't need to hold hands or hug or do any of those things.
They're not looking at it as a progression. They're just giving you the steps.
Yeah, it's just, hey, let's go do this. And I think that has to do with survival too. I think it's the idea that you are taking as much as you can in the shortest amount of time with the least amount of responsibility. And all of those other forms of affection tend to create connection, you know? I don't know about you, but I know that, you know, holding somebody's hand while going for a walk can be an extremely beautiful, exciting moment with someone, and that can create a bond that, you know, is just as powerful as any other form of affection, even the ones that are, you know, closer to sex. So I think it all very much has to do with this idea that you're in survival mode, and men need to be able to get out of survival mode and learn how to love. And love requires that you feel like you have something to share. And I don't think, you know, there's something about loving somebody. When you truly love somebody, you don't want anyone else. And I think that's something, I mean, I know when I am in love with someone, or I have loved someone, all I wanted was them. I didn't want to see anybody else in that way. And even in those moments where, you know, things would come up in such a way where it was almost like, you know, for some people there might have been a temptation. It was almost angering to me that was what was presented, or that was what was, yeah. And so, but that's love, right? That's what you do when you love somebody, and you don't want anyone else, because love is not transferable. Lust is. And so I think that's something that we all have to kind of look at too. If you're in a relationship with a person and you can see somebody else lustfully, what does that mean about how you really feel about the person you're with? You know? So anyway, okay, so that's kind of my notes. What are your thoughts?
That was all?
Yeah, for right now.
For right now.
I might think of more when you start talking.
Oh, okay.
So usually that's what happens.
I'm not really even sure where to take off. I felt like we popped
I'm so sorry.
a lot. That's okay.
I know, I do this all the time.
That's fine. I feel like we never really stick with the title of the podcast.
Well, it is. I mean, this is very much. I mean, because just if we're gonna go back to it, what makes somebody beautiful versus what makes somebody hot? I mean, you tell me in your words what you think.
I'm the wrong person to ask because I literally do not use the word hot.
Right.
Like, it is not a... How do I put it? It's not even an option in my mindset. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I
Like,
think
viewing someone that way is not an option. The only way to view someone is... There's different levels, okay? So I have a group of guy friends, and there was a time that I heard them all talking. They were like, okay, oh, that girl's hot, that girl's cute, this one's gorgeous, this one's stunning, this one's beautiful.
Right.
And they have their own different ratings on what they mean. Okay? It's weird to me, because for them, they're able to look at that and be like, yeah, this girl's like this girl's like that, this girl's like that. They're seeing all these other aspects and traits, physical traits in all these other females when their girlfriend's right there. Right?
right.
Their girlfriend is right there. They're in a relationship. In the most logical and respectful thing you could do is discard all of the other females that you're looking at and focus on the person you're with right now, and be like, yeah, I see you're beautiful, you're cute, you're stunning, you're gorgeous, and at the same time, I have my own ideas on what all those mean.
Right.
For example, if a guy walks up and calls someone hot, he's obviously looking physically at their body, okay?
Right.
Beautiful is more of a personality. If it's stunning, it's more of their appearance and the way they carry themselves. If it's you're gorgeous, it's more of like something that's charming, like the eyes or the hair or a smile, right?
Okay.
But it's not in the same category as hot, like, because that's very much so body and all that. So it's interesting because I'm the wrong person to ask, because hot is not something that is in my mindset. That's not a option to view someone like that, if that makes sense.
Right. Well, and I think that's because I don't think that you function in the survival mode. I think you have determined that as much as you like dirt, the pumpkin spice is not for you, and you're looking for something deeper. And I think that's what God is calling us to now, because it's time for us to realize that we've allowed the devil to mess with us to the point where he has destroyed sexuality in our minds, and we need to go and seek God to figure out what sexuality is really supposed to be. And I think this is the beginning of that. I think the understanding that beauty and hotness are two different things is kind of a stepping stone to that, because it is to distinguish between the two. It says, well, why is that even a thing? They talk about on there that you can have somebody that's beautiful and hot, right? And here's the lady on that podcast, I don't know if you caught it, but at some point she said she was talking about, because they started talking about the Madonna whore complex, the idea that men are looking for the Madonna, you know, which would be like the Virgin Mary, and the whore, right? The idea that you have this perfect specimen that can do no wrong, that's this perfect angelic being, and then you have this whore who's willing to
They're looking for the hot and the beauty in one person.
Right, and that's the thing is that exists, but the problem is that the dirt has been so dirty for so long that they can't imagine the beautiful, innocent person partaking in something so vile in some ways. But the truth is that when you switch section, because if you're looking at sexuality as this disgusting, vile, we do things that shouldn't even be talked about experience, then yes. But then my question is, well, maybe that's not what sexuality is meant to be.
No, because sexuality was a gift from God. We have simply, how do I put it? We've destroyed. Yeah, no.
We've destroyed its purpose.
Stripped it from its value.
You know, sexuality isn't just for reproduction. That's not, and that's the thing is that you have to look at sexuality as a form of affection.
It's another way to connect with your other half.
Mm-hmm.
It is not simply just a act or a way of affection or a way to reproduce.
Yeah.
It is a connection between you and the person you're supposed to be with the rest of your life, which is why you're supposed to wait till marriage.
And I don't think sexuality was created by God for reproduction first. I think reproduction is the blessing that comes from it. Yeah. It's the idea that, but because think about it, you have two people that love each other, that have that connection, right? And they form a human being that is the two of them together. I mean, that in and of itself is like this.
Hold on. Okay, so there's the trio, right? God
the Father, God the Son,
and the Holy Spirit. Okay. So originally it was God the Father and the Holy Spirit.
I think Jesus has always been there. In fact, I think there's other scholars too that believe that Jesus was the one that was walking in the garden, but I'm not entirely sure if that's
Well, basically I was going to put out there that I just made the realization that it was Adam and Eve, and the whole point was to, as you were saying, that sexuality was, the aftermath was to give, right? Create life, and God created us in His image, which is showing the pattern. He had two beings create one. Two beings created Adam. Two beings created Adam's son. I'm not familiar with their names or whatnot, but I think that's the pattern that we're seeing, and that's one of the reasons that sexuality was created. Like, I think it was for the connection at first, and then the aftermath led to more creation.
Well, just think about it. Okay, when two human beings come together, you have three different parts of your person that are connecting with another person, or that should. I don't think that happens a lot of the time in our culture now. I remember back in the day when I was going through a bunch of stuff, and I asked God about sexuality. One of the things He said to me was, a lot of people go to the altar when they get married, and they say, okay, I'm connecting myself to this person physically, but I still retain the right to look and see at whatever I want to. So in other words, my soul and my mind and my spirit, those things are, I can look at whatever I want to. You know, it's the idea that I can look but not touch. And we see this over and over again said in relationships. It's like, well, I can look but not touch. But my argument against that is, okay, well, then that means that there are two aspects of you that are not connected to your partner, and you are a full being. Your being is physical, emotional, and spiritual. So if there's two aspects of you that you've decided not to connect with your partner, then you're not fully committed. You're not fully connected. You haven't actually decided your whole person to be with this person.
Yeah. You have not committed your whole self.
You've not committed.
Yeah.
So, and that's the thing is, and we don't understand this because we're taught culturally that's perfectly acceptable for you to have whatever fantasies you want about whoever you want and think things. But Jesus in the Bible talks about, if you look at a woman lustfully,
then you've already committed adultery.
So it's yes, and that's not to condemn anyone. The whole idea behind that is that there is an opportunity for a connection with another human being that's literally what I consider, what I would think would be like paradise, right? And we're constantly sabotaging it because we have accepted these beliefs from the world that say things that destroy us and destroy those relationships, and then we're constantly in turmoil and we can't figure out why. It's because we're accepting these lies that are floating around, and we go, yep, that's true, because the whole world is constantly telling us that that's true, when it's not. And we have to dispel those lies. We have to go, nope, it's not okay to look if I'm in a relationship. It's not okay to see other things. And the question that I would challenge men to ask themselves, and women if they're in that position, is why? What is in your heart that makes you want to seek out somebody else? Now, I think, and what's interesting is that most relationships start off strong. You know, if you have a man that really cares about the woman he's with, and you have a woman that really cares about the man she's with, it usually starts off, everything looks beautiful, right? They're together, they do things together. The guy, I've seen guys before that don't want anyone else but that woman in those times. But things deteriorate, and I think that the reason why they deteriorate is because of it's okay to look but not touch. I think temptation comes in the form of friends, you know, out at the club or out at the bar, and they're like, ooh, look at that woman, and then there's, hey, I bet you could go talk to her, or hey, I bet, and then all of a sudden, there's guilt, there's shame, and then they don't feel so connected to the person they're with, or the girls are doing the same thing, because that's why I hate girls' night, because that's what girls' night is for, guys. Girls' night is for getting all dressed up and going out with the girls and having other guys see you, look at you. I mean, look, we gotta be honest. We gotta get to the point where we're honest about what's really going on if we want good relationships. And good relationships are based on really loving someone and really honoring somebody.
But the amount of people who are not willing to give up that, I want to go out with the girls, like no matter what it is. And don't get me wrong, like when I go out with my male friends, there's those conversations all the time, right? They'll be like, oh, look at her butterface.
Right? I just learned that word today. That was a revelation to me.
Which I think is completely fucking retarded. I'm gonna put it out there. Like, I hate that term with a passion, because what you're doing is you're putting value on only some of the person. For one, if you're in a relationship, that's completely wrong. You should not be looking at someone in that way at all, right? Because the term butterface is she looks good except her face.
Right.
That's an awful term. You're saying, oh, the rest of you's good except you look terrible.
I don't even know how you honestly.
Exactly.
For me, that's not a thing. Like, either I look at the whole person and I go, wow, that person's attractive, or they're not.
Yeah, it's one or the other, right? But for some reason, the male majority has decided that it is completely acceptable to be like, yeah, the rest of her's good except her face. Like, it's hard for me to comprehend that, to just grasp that willingness to act along those lines.
You know, I feel like this is an interesting thing, because I'm sure you being in this place that you're in, emotionally and spiritually and stuff, makes you a perfect person to ask this question to. But there are probably people, actually we've had this conversation, there's people in my life before that I have been attracted to personality wise, but no amount of convincing could make me be attracted to them physically, and so I had to let the idea of a romantic relationship with that person go. And then, you know, like, there's people that initially I thought, oh, that's a good looking person, and then I spent like 10 minutes talking to them, and immediately after talking to them, it's like, oh, we would never work, and then I'm no longer attracted to them. Like, that's the done deal. So it really is, for me, it's like, either you've got enough of what I'm looking for in somebody that I can devote my whole self to you at some point. Like, I feel like there's an opportunity for me to be completely in love with you, or it's not going to happen. And that's that. And so there are people that initially, like, the conversation was what drew me to them. And like, I talked to them, and initially I was like, I'm not sure if I'm super attracted. And then after conversations, it was like, yes, I'm very attracted to you. But there was always some element where I could be like, it wasn't your looks that made me attracted to you initially, but it was your personality. And then, you know, but there were always some looks something that I was attracted to about their physical appearance. I don't know if that makes sense.
And
there's always
here's
the
thing.
potential for
in
that.
a relationship, if you can't physically be attracted to the person while also be mentally attracted to the person, their mind, the beauty of their intelligence, if you can't have both, then I don't really think you're loving the person to their fullest.
Right.
Like in a relationship, if you are like, oh yeah, I love having conversations, but I'm not physically attracted to you, I don't think you're living to your fullest. Everyone has a person. So with that being said, if someone says, oh, I'm not attracted to you physically, but we have great conversations, well, there's someone out there for you.
Right, and you're just meant to be friends, and that's okay. But I think we're
until
talking
you're in a
about,
relationship, because if you're the opposite sex, then friends are not a thing.
Right. And actually, I just watched a video that was really, really horrible. Like, it made me feel horrible.
The video you sent me.
It might have been, but it was talking about how basically it's 100% certain that men can't be just friends with women, and it was going through all the reasons why. Basically, like, either it was, because I remember us talking about it, but it was the idea that either they're holding out for this person to come around and see them in a romantic way, or they're just like playing the long game in some way and just seeing what will come of it. And it's sad, but I agree. But I agree with that on every level. Like, I don't think women should be friends with men. Now, I'm totally, and I know I've said this before, but one of the things that I was really, really impressed with about the friend group from my work is that all of the people that came out would always bring their significant other when we would go out. And so it was a friend group, right? And so if I'm sitting there talking to somebody's husband, well, my friend is right there, part of that conversation, or can be part of that conversation. So it was never a thing of me being just friends with somebody else. It was always the couples. The couples were friends, and the guys would kind of talk, and the women would be involved, and it was a great dynamic. And I was so impressed. I will always be so in awe of the fact that it was never even a spoken thing. Like, every single one of those people was just like, I'm bringing my significant other, and it was beautiful. It would make me happy every time, because it was exactly the way it should be. Nobody should be having friends and friends groups exclusively without their partner when they're in, especially when they're married. You have couple friends, and I think that couple friends are perfect. But yeah.
Or friends with the siblings of the person you're with. That's another thing.
Yeah.
Like that. I see no problem with that. If you're friends with your significant other sibling, for one, it's immediately no. Right? That it's an immediate, that's
as long as you're seeing them as brothers and sisters.
Exactly. Because at some point
tough.
they're going to be your brother-in-law or your sister-in-law.
Right.
Or the other. You become that, you have that sibling relationship.
Right.
And I can tell you, I've seen that firsthand before, to where you have that sibling relationship. It's not a stranger entering the house. It's So, because I can tell you, right, having male friends, if you're a female while in a relationship, completely unacceptable. Having female friends when you're in a relationship as a male is completely unacceptable. Because you're not wrong. I've met a lot of males who've been friends who have had 15 different girls in their phone while they're in a relationship. And it's like, okay, why are you devoting so much time to all these other people?
Right.
When your relationship, you're telling me all these relationship problems, right? And you could be devoting 80% more to this one person and completely remove all of them.
Right.
And your relationship would be 18 times better.
Well, and I would suggest that it's probably the reason why you hold on to other people is simply to have options. I mean, it's something probably difficult for people to admit, but that's a real...
Because men are so terrified of being alone. That's another thing, is I've had a lot of friends who have been terrified of being alone.
Yeah. Well, I think everybody, the fear of not having... There's so many fears that go along with relationships, right? Or the lack thereof.
And another thing is, like, from personal experience, I've never had more than one female in my phone. Unless it's like, family, or it's a sibling's significant other, right? Simply to contact them if I can't get a hold of the other person. I've never had more than one female in my phone. I'm really
That's good.
even if it was just friends at the time.
I can't say the same because online dating is a weird it's a weird thing in the way that you can meet 5 people and start talking with them. But the thing that always happens, and that happens with me, is that when you're really looking for somebody to have a relationship with, you have these conversations with people, and at some point you realize which one you want to choose, and then you wipe out the rest. Those other conversations dwindle away to nothing.
For me, it's always Okay, so for me, whenever I was having a conversation with a female, right, and I had an interest in them, which I think every female I have talked to at least had an interest in, because it's only been them in the phone. I've always done that because I want to devote as much time to get to know them, so I can make my assumption quicker.
Right.
And it's faster, because if you devote more time to that one person, then you're wasting less time.
Well, again, I'll give you an example. So with online dating for me, and I applaud you. I am not at all trying to convince you not to do that.
Yeah, I'm aware.
I understand. And for me too, I think that a lot of these people that I'm talking to, I've never met in person, and so because of that, I don't have any clue. You
don't have that connection that you would if you.
It's really just about, for me, I always look at it as more of a as if I think of it like speed dating. If I was in a room and I was sitting there talking to a guy for 5 minutes straight, and then I moved on to the next guy. I'm not moving on to the next guy because I'm not interested in this one. By the end of the night, after talking to all these guys, I'm probably going to have one that I'm the most interested in.
I just want to put out there, I think we have it's almost the same strategy of dating, right? But what you're doing is you're taking a long period of time with multiple people. I'm taking a shorter amount of time with one person. And I think it's the same concept. We have the exact same concept. It's just yours is long-term, mine's short-term.
It's very interesting when you're having conversations with people, how quickly it can go from, oh, this is great, to, oh, crap, this person isn't right for me. And sometimes it's on those deal breaker topics. I can tell you, I could be talking to somebody and have a great conversation. We could be talking about art and coffee and all this good stuff that I love, and then they say something like, oh, I'm 420 friendly, and then it's like, I'm
or
done.
I like hunting ducks.
Yeah, I like poor ducks. But like hunting, sometimes it's even more subtle things, like I have a problem with certain things like
vaping or smoking,
but horror movies, if somebody says, oh, I am totally into horror movies, it's immediately my interest is,
which I don't understand, because the whole point of a horror movie is to scare you. Why do you seek to be in a state of fear? A horror movie is supposed to get you an adrenaline rush, right? There's 50 million other ways to get an adrenaline rush.
Well, I think people sometimes are attracted to darkness simply because it's unknown.
But I have the same curiosity, but it's not drawn into the way of horror. It's because horror, when I watch horror, is very demonic. There's so much
which is why I don't like it.
Well, there was a movie that a friend tried to get me to watch. It was Terrifier 3, right? The clown is quite literally possessed by a demon.
Yeah.
And it has all these manipulative abilities to do these terrible things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And having those thoughts in your head is just such a burden. That's a real burden.
Yeah, exactly.
It's real.
Yeah. You can let go of it. For me, I don't know if it's easy for you, but for me, it's easy to just forget I saw something. It is literally, I didn't see that.
I cannot.
I immediately it's almost like I just pull it out of my head. I have these little boxes right in my head. And none of them touch each other, so I'm able to easily sort through and organize and just pull what I don't want and throw it.
Well, I'll give you an example. There was a time where I watched, I think it's called Poltergeist or something like that. I didn't watch the movie, I just saw a clip of the movie. And it was something that was on the screen somewhere else where I was, and so I couldn't just go out and turn it off. It was it was out of my control. But anyway, I saw it briefly, and after seeing it, I remember it just playing in my mind, and I think this is just, you know, a tactic of the enemy. Like it's one of those things to get you to mess with your mind. But I had to pray and like pray that it would leave, because it was just like playing in my mind over and over again. And I did not want it. Like it was just, I think for me, a lot of those demonic films and the horror movies, it's because I know that,
you know, the motivation behind it. You know,
but people have gone through that kind of terror. They've gone through those situations where people have done horrible things, and you know, and people are possessed, and and the enemy would do those things if he had the chance. I mean,
but it's very, how do I put it? Okay, so I saw a clip not too long ago, right? Mm-hmm. And it was literally the most like fucked up thing you could imagine. I'm not even trying to put it into words. I shouldn't. I'm not going to put that image in your head.
Don't do it. I hate it. Like, yeah, people try to like explain things to me. I'm like, don't even tell me. I don't want to know.
It's just so twisted. Okay, it involves sex, murder, rape, and like,
what the heck are you watching?
I did not willingly watch this. It just popped up on the screen. Okay. And it was literally the meaning of just pure evil.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And it's, to me, it's like, how can someone imagine this? Being in a room, being like, yes, okay, we need a movie idea. Oh, let's do this, this, and this. That is the most twisted, fucked up thing I've ever heard out of someone's mouth. Seriously. Mm-hmm. Like, they're being dead serious. Like, don't get me wrong, I make jokes about, like, you know, killing someone because they pissed me off at work, right? I'll make jokes about that. But this person was being dead serious, like, yeah, let's make this a movie. Like, to me, that's so fucking twisted.
But that's the thing, is that I don't think those people are necessarily functioning from their own mindset. I think they've invited things.
It comes from that some people just want to watch the world burn. Mm-hmm. That's exactly where it comes from.
Well, some people, I mean, like if you were going to look at it from a psychological perspective, right? I bet there's a lot of evidence that people tend to gravitate towards those things that they are themselves incredibly afraid of, or that they feel like they have to kind of experience in order to understand it and be able to let it go. I'm in the realm of thinking that people are drawn to that stuff because all of that stuff is a counterfeit, right? Fear is a counterfeit to faith. Death is a counterfeit to life. I mean, it's the idea that everything is either there's a truth or there's a lie. It's one or the other. And if you think about horror films and that dark spiritual side of things, what are you really seeking? You're really seeking to understand the supernatural. And there's God's supernatural, and then there's the enemy's supernatural, and the enemy's supernatural is pure destruction. It is the destruction of everything that is good. And so that's what you're dabbling in. And those images and those thoughts, if you're willing to go to that place, well then you're basically chilling with the enemy. You're chilling with the devil.
It's just insane to me how people can find those thoughts and interactions pleasing. Like, I understand it's the influence is from the Antichrist, pure evil, the embodiment of evil. Right. No good. But at the same time, you were created by God, so you obviously have this. You have this previous judgment, right? To where obviously at some point in your life you were like, yeah, this is wrong. I'm not gonna go near this, right? You obviously avoided that, and then you made your way into it. That the judgment is gone. Where did it go? Did you just?
I think that the further you get into evil, it starts with baby steps. You start by watching something that seems innocent, and it just takes you further and further. But it's curiosity, right? And the curiosity towards evil grows the more you see. I've always. There was a time, like back in school, I remember there was this one book in the library at school that was about ghosts, And I was fascinated by this book, and so was everybody else. Like, it was probably the most sought after book. Why? Because we don't understand it. Is it real?
Our curiosity is drawn to things that we want to understand.
Right, we want to understand. The problem is that once you open the wrong doors, that leads you down a path that's very difficult to get yourself out of until you're in a spot where you're desperate. And I think there's a lot of, you look at a lot of testimonies of people that have been very involved in bad things.
I'm not going to lie, I've done a lot of research on paranormal stuff, right? Because I'm curious. I feel as though paranormal very well correlates to spiritual warfare, right?
Well, that's what it is. I mean, It's all, there's either angels or demons.
Yeah.
That's what you got.
But the way that it presents itself in the physical form down on Earth is interesting. The way, the methods, I guess, that they present themselves. Like, for example, ghost hunting. I've had friends that are like, oh yeah, ghosts are real. Like, I have this box that flips through radio channels and they can speak to me. And, like, it's hard for me to, I don't know, get the idea across that you're not talking to a dead human. You're talking to a demon that's disguised as a human, trying to get you to mess around with things that you shouldn't be messing around with.
Right. Well, and again, it's the slippery slope. It's the further you get into it. It's very much the same. I mean, to draw in what we were talking about earlier, it's pornography, right? It's the same darkness. The thing about the gourmet meal that God was talking to me about is that the reason why pornography is so, I think, appealing to people is that it's something that temporarily,
easily obtainable, temporary, and satisfactory.
But it also heightens your ability to be aroused, right? So, but it's an external thing. It's a thing where it's not coming from love. It's not coming from affection. It's coming from something very, very raw and again, it's that dirt. It's that dirtiness. It's the whore. It's the let's just do whatever we can. But the problem with it is that the darkness continues to get darker. It's interesting to me that people want to add pain to sex. They want to add things that are going to hurt the other person or hurt themselves, or it just gets darker and
masochism.
Like all of these things get added because at some point the pornography that they saw before, where it's just maybe two people having sex or whatever, isn't good enough anymore. It's not doing it for them. It's not giving them the same high. So they have to get something deeper and darker and darker. But it always goes darker. And the reason it's always going darker is because it's the counterfeit. It's exactly what Satan intended, to get you to a place where you have where you're so depraved, where you're so disgusting that you can no longer even stand to be in the same room with yourself because you're looking at yourself in this light of condemnation. And what Jesus would say in that moment is come to me, get forgiven, and then know that isn't stuck to you anymore. But that's not what the devil's doing. The devil wants to get you deeper and deeper because what his hope is that eventually you get to the point where you've done things that are so
unspoken of,
horrible that you won't be able to even
look at yourself.
You won't be able to feel forgiven or think that you can be forgiven, which is untrue. But that's the goal, which is the same thing with horror films and all the rest of it. Because again, you're filling your mind with these very awful thoughts, and those are thoughts that follow you around. And so maybe you see this horrible horror movie, and you go to work and you start thinking things about that movie in relationship to the people you're working with or the whatever, you know what I mean? So then how do you feel about yourself? How do you now view yourself? And that's the devil's game. The gourmet meal is very much about God saying, look, sexuality was, again, it was a part of affection. And I don't know about you, but the more I know somebody, the more I see, like, I can tell you, I've been in love with several men in my life. And the reason why I loved them was because I saw these amazing things in them. You know, like I was praying the other day, and I was thinking about how, like even now, like after the things I've been through, all of that stuff, I can still see those amazing things in them, and I still look at them like, wow, they're amazing for these things. So in other words,
You see the potential in them.
right, that love still exists because of the fact that the idea of them is they're still the same. All the things I saw in them then, I can still see in them now, right? But I can tell you that my attraction to them in each of my relationships grew the more I got to see these amazing things. So I would see something else amazing, and I'd be like, oh, I like him even more. And, you know, oh, there's something else, and I like him even more. And my attraction to them was not based on physical appearance. You know, it wasn't, I mean, let me rewind. I was attracted to them physically, but their physical appearance got more and more attractive the more I saw the amazing things in them. So in other words, the whole person was what became more and more attractive. The more and more attractive they got, the more I could see or I could experience them in a sexual way. I'm not talking about like having sex, you know, but I'm saying that romantic sexual opportunity became more and more intense based on the fact that I was knowing them more and more. The original word for sex in I think it's in Genesis is to know. The more you know somebody, the closer you get to them, the more connected you are to them, the more sexual you can be, the more sexually intense it becomes, and then you're sharing something amazing. And that's the gourmet meal. And I think it only gets better. I truly believe that when you know Jesus and you have the Holy Spirit in you, you can ask the Holy Spirit things about your partner, and he can tell you the things that you're, probably if this is weird, I realize that, but the Holy Spirit can tell you things about your partner that they need or that they want. So then the connection becomes again, all three, right? Spiritual, mental, and physical. But the opportunities in that realm are endless. They go on infinitely. Because you will never know somebody completely, because everybody's always finding new things that they love, or finding new talents, or new abilities, and there's always something more to be in awe of. But pornography is the opposite. It goes down into this hole where you're destroying each other more and more to try to find some sexual satisfaction that eventually is just going to kill you. Yeah. Whereas God's way is going to bring you closer together, make you stronger together, have a greater bond where you've got each other's backs and you're there for each other. Pornography will just tear you apart. And so, again, that's the devil's game, right? Destruction. Steal, kill, and destroy, as opposed to living life and having it from Jesus abundantly. So that's the problem. And I think that's the difference between hotness and beauty, and in all respects. You know, sexuality that comes from a heart that sees somebody as beautiful is true and forever and loving and good and built on a relationship, because seeing beauty means that you've found a connection, whereas hotness is about lust and taking and using and then leaving behind. You think about some guy that goes in, how awful is it for a guy to use a woman for her body? A body that he may, I mean, like, honestly, he may or may not the next day even think is hot, right? And then just discard her and walk away like she's nothing. It's a pretty dismal existence. And I love how Jordan Peterson talks about it in his marriage talks, because he talks about it. He's like, yeah, you could live like that. He's like, but you know, at the end of the day, what kind of disgusting human being have you become? You know, and it's true. You've had sex with lots of people and you've discarded all of them, and they may or may not care. It doesn't really matter, I suppose. But the truth is that what do you have to show for it? Whereas if you're building a life with somebody and you're creating something amazing and you're knowing somebody and they know you, what's that worth? What's it worth to have a deep connection? I think it's pretty much the paradise on earth. So
say that lady, I don't know, in the episode, she was, I was glad that the male was there because she would say things and I would get lost in translation and then he'd clarify it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not sure where she was going with things, and I'm not saying like this to be sexist, but I was like, I was getting very lost in her translation, but I'm glad the guy was there too.
Yeah.
It was weird. It was almost like she couldn't fully speak her thoughts. Almost, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm not sure if that was her husband.
No, I think she was just the third person on the podcast, but I feel like, that topic of beauty and hotness is a very emotionally vulnerable topic for people, especially for women, because again, I'm telling you, I couldn't do what men do, right? As a woman,
apparently I can't do what men do.
And I applaud you. I'm so sorry. The majority of men, and that's the thing. The guy even said, men being men, because men are men, and this is how they're going to view things. And I completely disagree with that, because I think there is I think the proper way he should say it is because men are taught what they're taught. And obviously, you've been given the grace to know things differently.
So, for future, I understand that this is a general term.
Right.
But there's a distinct difference between boys and men. Very distinct difference, and it's behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Boys are very irresponsible, okay? Inconsiderate, and they're like, oh, boys will be boys, right? That is exactly the mindset. A man in God's image was supposed to have eyes for one person, was supposed to provide, carry, and love.
Right. Husbands, love your wives. Christ loved the church.
Meaning that they're not supposed to have eyes to be able to go, oh yeah, that one's pretty.
Yeah, I agree, but I think honestly, if we refer to these men as boys, we're actually making boys out, and I think there's boys that are very loving and caring. So let's call them unenlightened men.
Okay, but the thing is that a boy is not determined by his age. A man is not determined by his age, and neither is a boy.
True. You're right.
So say you have an 11-year-old and he has the same idea that I do, right? I'm not saying that, like, people can perceive me how they want to. They can see me as a boy or a man. Some men will be very irritated to hear the way that I'm putting it.
Right.
My thought process on taking away their masculinity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because of the way they want to behave. Because they want to be like, yeah, I want to fantasize about this female, but I'm still with I'm loyal and love my girlfriend, but I still want to fantasize about this person.
Right.
You're not a man. I'm gonna put it out there. Your behavior is not acting in the love of God.
Right.
So they might be pissed with me for saying that. If we continue to say men, I feel like it's removing that image that God wanted to project for men, if that makes sense.
So from this point on, you want to be able to communicate that when we say men, we mean men that are... Because
I have a friend, right, who literally has a very similar mindset to me. Mm-hmm. He's like, I don't want to look at girls. There was one time that we were talking, and he was like, oh, never mind. He was like, congratulations, I'm glad you're happy. Mm-hmm. He like stopped himself. I was like, what was that? He was like, I didn't want to say anything, because he was like, I love my girlfriend and I only want to view her this way. Yeah, and
that's I applaud him. Exactly. Again, that's a rare but beautiful and...
Exactly. He was like, I'm happy for you. I'm glad, this is going on and all that. Mm-hmm. That was like stunning to me. I've never found someone else who has valued their partners. It's put on a pedestal so high up to where everyone else is invisible.
Well, and it's about making everybody else a sibling, if you will. If you view everybody else as not a potential partner, but as a brother or sister, then you're not going to see them as as anything but the way that you should see them, and that's good. And I get what you're saying. You don't want to be grouped into this group of people that is very keen on finding value in seeing sexuality everywhere, even to the detriment of the relationship. I get that, and that's, again, I applaud you, because that's rare, and it's beautiful, and it's exactly what we need to transition to. But again, that's about teaching men to love, and the first step in all of that is making sure that men know that they can be forgiven for whatever they feel condemned by, and B, knowing that they have innate value that doesn't come from whether they can, lift heavy things or get a great job or any of that. It comes from the fact that God made them and He loves them and He wants good things for them. And once you understand that God doesn't make anything without a purpose, and then you find that purpose, it's a lot easier to live your life knowing that you have something to offer somebody. And I think that's the thing, is when you're walking around feeling like you're nothing and you have nothing to offer anyone, you live in survival mode. And survival mode takes from everything and everyone.
There's no giving.
There's no giving, because you don't feel like you have anything to give. And so it's you live in lust. And lust is a drug, right? Sex becomes a drug in that situation where it's no longer, and that's why I think you can jump right into it, because it's not about relationship, it's not about loving
There's no
someone,
building
it's about
stones. It's like you can take a pill and there's no stepping stones to it. There's not like, oh, do this, this, and this. It's just you can take it. So I know your method of translating that. I understand it.
It's the idea that it's a relief, a temporary relief. The physical act of sex is a temporary relief to the very painful things that are going on in somebody's heart. And if that's your drug of choice, well, then you're going to see women who are hot as being your choice of women as opposed to anything else. And I think that's why the world has gone that direction. It's no surprise to me that there's a correlation between, it seems like there's this rise of very, very superficial sexuality, right? And there seems to be a rise in people using drugs of all different kinds and doing, even if it's prescribed drugs, Xanax or whatever, like people have all these anxiety issues. Again, it's because we're ignoring all of the lights flashing on our dashboards, and we're saying, I'm not willing to go and do the deeper work of figuring out what the heck is going on with my car, because I don't want to pay the price for it. But it's worth it to pay the price and have a fully functional self that can enjoy life beyond survival. And I think that's what God intended. That's the gourmet meal. You're eating dirt because you think that's all that's available to you. But God's saying, no, I fixed it. I fixed it all. The table's over there. All you have to do is believe. All you have to do is walk over to the table and enjoy the meal I've prepared for you. And there's so many people that don't want to do that. And so I think what the deal is what I would say to you is if you're talking to men, even on this podcast, and we should start talking about this, how did you get to be the way that you are? Because obviously, one of the things that is probably unique about you is you do feel like you have something to offer people in your life. You do feel like you are an asset to the people around you. You feel like you're a blessing. You can be a blessing. You do this all the time. Like, you do things deliberately to show that you care and that you're involved, right? But that's something that you've decided in your mind, that this is in your heart, that that's what you're going to do. And I think that's something that's missing in a lot of men, because they don't feel like they're valuable enough to do that. It takes you feeling like you have something to offer something. So maybe that's something that we need to start talking about.
So I need to start taking notes about myself.
Yeah. Like, what happened? I mean, honestly, sometimes...
Because I understand what you're talking about. Is how did I get to the point of having a thought process such as what I do now?
Yeah.
And
I mean, obviously, we have to give credit to God. It's the grace of God, and God offers that grace to everybody. You know, any man that feels like he's been caught in the snares of living in survival mode should know right now that God is very willing to hear you if you talk to him and ask him, talk to him about how you're feeling, and tell him. He wants to get you out of that. He wants you to live a fulfilled life, and to have it abundantly. It just takes.
okay, so the simplest way I can put it into perspective for relationship, okay, because I have a lot of different categories on how I perceive things different than a majority of men. For relationship, to put it into a simpler perspective is, for example, my biggest fear is not being in control of myself, right? Hurting others, right? It's honestly hurting others, but not being in control of myself leads to that. Because I know the capability that I have of how I could hurt someone emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually, in all different ways. Okay.
It's our lethal weapons. So sorry. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. And I've been in a situation where I've been hurt myself, right? So I take those experiences myself, and I think it's the consideration of I don't want anyone else to go through this. I've been in a relationship where someone's like, oh, so-and-so's so hot, and they're like, don't you agree? And I'm like, no, I straight told them, I was like, I don't look at anyone else except you.
Right.
And they're like, it's okay, I'm not saying it's okay. I'm like, no, I don't care if you think it's okay.
Right.
I'm saying that this is my boundary. This is a line that I will not cross, because I know what it's like to be on the other side.
Right.
I know what it's like to have someone say, oh, so-and-so's hot. That makes you feel like, well, what do they have that I need to have so that you'll look at me that way?
And why the heck are you with me then?
Exactly.
Yeah, go find them.
So, for me, that's why I've completely discarded that whole, the guys are out and they're like, oh, so-and-so's so hot, or, oh, she's cute, you should go ask for her number, right? If I'm out with the guys, right, if I'm out with a group of guys, my friend group, I'll encourage them. If he's single and he thinks a girl's cute, I'm like, go for it.
Yeah.
Go for it. Like, no balls, you won't. Yeah. Like, come on, you got a nice ass truck, all right? you got some money in your account, like, go for it.
Yeah.
And I'll encourage that way, but it's not like, oh yeah, she's hot, you should go for her, right?
Right.
Because even when I'm single, like right now, I'm single. Like, I don't even perceive someone in that way. I will not look at a girl online and go, oh yeah, she's hot.
Well, because you're not looking from the perspective of a lustful, I want to take something. It's you're out there looking at.
I don't even look at even someone that I was interested in. I've never looked at oh, you're hot, right?
Right.
There was a time in a relationship that they wanted me to call them hot. I'm not gonna lie, I did, because that's what they wanted, and I thought as though that's something that made them feel valued. But it felt wrong to me to even say that.
And that's difficult because you want to be true.
Yeah, you want to be authentic, but at the same time you want to please the person you're with.
I think you have to look at what the question really was. I mean, if you to take it down to a more, maybe a little bit more descriptive, do you find me sexually attractive? That's what they're asking, and that's what the hot is. Do you find me sexually attractive? And I think that maybe if that was the question asked,
it would have been more authentic of an answer.
But you probably would have answered with a resounding yes, of course I do. You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to be in a romantic relationship with somebody that you don't find sexually attractive. Sex is not. It's
not a bad thing, and that's something we need to clarify. Sexuality is not a bad thing. It is a gift from God that has been destroyed by humans completely.
By lies.
Yeah. And now it's perceived as this disgusting thing that you should never talk about.
Right, the dirt.
Yeah, exactly. Or the pumpkin spice.
I really want some coffee now. Like, you keep talking about pumpkin spice, and I'm like, wow, that sounds really good. I kind of want some.
And
I'm so sorry.
That's what
I
mankind has
love-
done. We've completely stripped sexuality from its properties, from its values,
Right.
and turned into simply an action of disgusting.
Superficial.
Exactly. It's superficial. It's disgusting. And it's simply just a physical act.
Right.
That's not it. If someone's like, do you view me sexually, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's in, do you view me as the only person you could ever have a relationship with?
Right.
Do
And
you
that's
love me to
beautiful.
your fullest extent?
Could
And
you be the ultimate affectionate,
exactly.
or
And it pisses me off when guys are like, yeah, I can have a one night stand. You have a girlfriend. Like,
Yeah.
that's disgusting.
yeah, why are you considering somebody else
Exactly.
when you've made a certain amount of commitment to this person?
Obviously you haven't. You're simply saying, I'm loyal, but I still see other people.
But-
You're not saying I'm committed.
Exactly, and that's what I was talking about with people going even to the altar, getting married to somebody, and kind of reserving the idea that, well, I'm marrying you physically. The rule is, I can't sleep with somebody else, but I can think about it, because that's not what the rule said. And
No, because like it says in the Bible, if a man looks at a woman lustfully, vice versa as well, then that person has already committed adultery.
right, and the thing about that is that it's because Jesus was trying to show that marriage is not just something physical. It is something that is mental, and because we are three in one, we were made in the image of God. We have a spirit, we have a body, we have a mind, and those three things have to be aligned. And if they're not aligned, then we get kind of messed up inside.
And I just want to put something out there. We talked about this previously upstairs in your room, and it was about how when God said that, the disciples were like, so should we just not marry?
Well, actually, I looked up that scripture after, and they were actually talking about divorce. So Jesus said, you can't get divorced unless there's a sexual immorality. So basically, if somebody is unfaithful to you. So the disciples said, and they didn't say, is it better not to marry? They made a statement. They said, it is better. So they said something like, it is better not to marry. And Jesus said, well, the only people that can follow that are the people that's given to. And the part about the unfaithfulness is a part that's earlier in that same
Okay,
book.
so when you were telling me that, it was mistranslated.
Yeah, I didn't look up.
So we're just gonna discard that then.
Well, no, actually, because it was something that I was going to talk about anyway, because it's still relevant. The fact is that basically the disciples were ready to throw away the idea of marriage, because the whole reason why they were willing to throw away the idea of marriage was the idea that they couldn't get divorced. Well, guess what? You know, when you get married and you make that commitment to somebody, which is exactly what we're talking about. You get married and you make a commitment, is that you want to love and take care and you choose this person, right? There's a safety in that. It becomes a safe place. You can know that person intimately. Sex was only meant for marriage because you're knowing that person to this very, very deep level. But again, it's all three, right? When you're married to somebody, you're supposed to be all three. The disciples, when they were told that they couldn't get divorced, they were like, whoa, it's better not to marry then. Because all of a sudden it's like, well, if I can't get rid of this person, if I don't like them, what am I doing? And Jesus, even in that sermon, gave the stipulation, unless they're unfaithful. So in other words, this wasn't the disciples going, well, if she cheats on me, or she's mean, or if she's whatever, like she's looking at other guys or whatever, then I can't leave her. They knew that there was an out if they had been unfaithful, right? Because obviously you've already, once they're unfaithful, they've already destroyed the connection. But the fact that the disciples were willing to give up the whole idea of marriage, again, speaks to the idea of survival mode, right? Because now they didn't value that relationship. If they had valued the relationship, the marital relationship, they would have been like, yeah, that's a no-brainer. Of course we're not leaving our wives. I mean, think about it. Is there really something, aside from unfaithfulness, now I understand that there's abusive practices, but I think there's a lot of sexual immorality that pairs with abuse anyway. So I don't think that's I think the two go hand in hand. So if you're with somebody who's abusing you, you're probably getting abused in multiple ways at the same time. But aside from abuse, you just look at partners that are together and they're like, oh, we're incompatible now. I don't think it's ever, and honestly, I think most marriages fail because of sexual immorality. I don't think they're failing because again, it's the idea that, if your husband, the first time your husband goes out and looks at another woman lustfully, and you can see it, because there's times where your wife does that. You can be standing next to somebody, a partner, and watch them flirting with somebody else, and you know what they're thinking. Even if you can't prove it, what has it done to your relationship? It's already done, right? But the disciples understood this because Jesus just said it. So basically what I'm saying is that the whole idea is that they were willing to give up this very beautiful marital relationship.
Simply because this person wasn't faithful.
Simply because it was, what if this person, I just don't like this person anymore, or what if I just don't want to be with this person anymore? Because again, Jesus gave the out for sexual immorality. He said, so the disciples knew that if their wife was sexually unfaithful to them, that they could get out, right? So they knew that out was there, but yet they still were like, oh man, you want me to stay with her regardless of anything else? You know what I mean? And think about it. I mean, there's all sorts of reasons why people. I remember reading in this book one time about a guy who was looking to divorce his wife because she had gained too much weight. She had a baby, and she'd gained lots of weight. And the guy, so the interesting part was that the therapist or whoever, the friend that he was talking to, said to him, the guy was really pissed about the fact that his wife had gained so much weight. And he's like, how do I leave her in the most horrible way I could? Like he wanted to stick it to this woman for doing this to him, because apparently, I don't know, I'm assuming it hurt his self-esteem or something. I can't imagine being angry at somebody for gaining weight, and not having any empathy towards them. But if I'm recalling this right, basically the therapist said, well, how you really stick it to her is you treat her like a goddess for the next couple weeks, and then just dump her. So in other words, you make her think that you're you love bomb her, and then you dump her. Treat her like she's this amazing
But that's
woman.
a narcissistic trait right there.
Right, but again, this guy was being told to do this, right? He was being put in a position.
He's being told to, but he was wanting it.
Yeah, he wanted to really stick it to this woman. So the guy goes and does it, and the guy in the book, the guy that was writing the book, the therapist or whoever he was, wrote that a few months later he saw that same guy. He said, hey, what happened? Are you still with her? Or did you divorce her? He's like, no. It's like, why would I divorce her? It's like, she's a goddess. And so the whole point to what the guy was saying was that, his suggestion ultimately changed the man's mindset towards his wife, to the point where his in the beginning, his acting actually brought out a side of his wife, or probably made the wife feel so amazing that her reactions to him changed, and his reactions to her changed, and so his view of her changed. And so the whole idea is that, men and women, I don't like to exclude, because I know women do this too, but there's some pretty superficial reasons why people will decide that they no longer want to stay in a marriage. And I think that whole verse was pretty much talking about that kind of thing. You're just sick of the person you're with, you're bored with them, you want somebody else, or whatever. Again, I think your heart has to be in survival mode in order to get to that point. Because it's a big deal to divorce somebody. So you'd have to be in a state of serious survival mode. But the fact that in this book, your mindset can change your whole relationship. Well, I think Jesus knows that, right? God knows that. And he knows the tricks of the enemy to get people to do things they may regret later. But the disciples in that moment were very much like, well, I guess it's better not to get married if we can't get divorced. You know what I mean? If we can't get out of it. So it just goes to prove that even the disciples who were close to Jesus were still struggling with the same worldly mindsets. It's the same lies. Because they were willing to forfeit an amazing connection with somebody.
Simply because they were scared if I'm not attracted to this person in 3 or so months, then
And then I have to.
I'm afraid of God's trust.
I don't want to. Yeah. So I mean, again, relationship was the fight for relationship, the fight to love somebody in this world is a serious one because there's so many lies out there that war against it. And again, I think it starts with, man needs to get back to the place where he knows his purpose and he knows that he can live his purpose. Like that's what God has for him. And then you grow from there, because you can't love anyone else until you yourself feel loved by God. It's very difficult when you don't have anything to give. Your tank is empty. To go back to a car reference. We like those. I like those. So, yeah. But I think for you, the way that you view women is definitely because of how you view yourself. And your empathy towards people in general is because you take the things that have happened to you and you go, I don't want that to happen to anyone else. And that's that again is
Something with a completely opposite mindset. It's what has happened to me, so it's gonna happen to you.
right. And that's universal. That's just not men. That's
universal.
lots of
vice
people
versa.
are like,
Yeah.
man, I got screwed. I'm gonna screw everyone else over. That's destructive entitlement. That's a bad way to live. But I think understanding that you don't want anyone else to be in pain and trying to help other people avoid that by being the person, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And I think that's exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah.
But again, I think it's hard to come to that place when you don't feel like you have anything to offer, when you can't look at yourself in the mirror, when you're all alone and you don't have any prospects of who could possibly love you, and you can honestly say, well, God's shown me some amazing things in myself and I love those things, and even if nobody comes my way, I'm still going to love those things in me, and I can live in those things. And I think that's something that you can do, and I think that's something that everybody needs to be able to do, because then you realize, well, I have some pretty cool stuff to share with somebody, and then the hope becomes that, one day somebody will see that you.
Excuse me.
Did we cover it?
Yeah, I think we hit the nail on the head.
Mm-hmm. That was quite the video.
We took a 10-minute video and made it last 2 hours.
Oh, this is a long podcast.
I know, this
Yay.
was our longest one.
Oh, cool.
Do you want to call it there then?
Yep, I guess
Yeah.
so.
Okay.
Okay.